Did you murder your father?
I absolutely did not murder my father. Without a doubt, I loved him.
Did you have anything to do to help your mother dispose of and burn your father?
Absolutely not.
Tell me and let me.
No. Like I said, I love my father. He was the backbone.
This morning, we're shining a spotlight on the fallout from the burn pile murder trial. Remember that one? The Ferris family drama has now become the focus of the latest episode of 48 Hours. The family's matriarch, Melody Farris, was convicted and sentenced to spend the rest of her life in prison for the murder of her husband, Gary, a prominent Atlanta lawyer. Now, this was a dramatic moment that many of us remember watching on court TV. It was called the Ferris wheel during Melody Farris's trial. The Georgia family's turmoil played out all in front of a jury and for the world to see. So Melody was convicted for her husband's killing, but her defense team tried to blame their son Scott as an alternate suspect. Well, Scott is speaking with 48 Hours, doubling down that it was his mother behind his dad's murder.
I absolutely had nothing to do with my father's death. And it was 100% Melody Farris who murdered my father. That is the truth.
Why do you think she accused you of killing your father?
Because I was an easy target. I lived on the property. I'm a former military.
All right, so the question we're asking our legal analysts, does this latest interview make Scott Ferris even more believable? We know the jury believed him. Do you? Let's bring back in former U.S. Attorney William Ehlenfeld and criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Franz Borghardt. All right, great to have you both here on this. Franz, let me start with you. As you gave us a lot of analysis throughout the course of this trial, your thoughts on hearing that Scott is doubling down now with 48 Hours?
I can't imagine what it's like to be accused of killing your own father during a trial where the person you believe killed your father is on trial. So I can't even contemplate what it's like being Scott. That said, I think it's a very human response for him to double down. I think it was a smart move for him. I mean, look, there's collateral damage for this. Even if he had nothing to do with the death of his father, there are always going to be people that kind of look at him a little differently now and say, oh, is that the guy that may have killed his own dad? So, I don't blame the guy. I don't blame the guy at all. And I think that him doubling down with the documentary or the interview, the sentencing was very impactful. His testimony at that was very impactful. So I kudos to him. I don't blame him in the least, Julie.
Right. I don't blame him either. There he is crying in the gallery in that shot. As you said, that moment where his mother was convicted. He said this to 48 Hours about the family drama, the Ferris wheel expression that we heard. He said, this whole Ferris wheel term, none of us really like it. But if you want to know who the motor of the turning of that Ferris wheel was, Melody Farris. She always stirred up drama, always. William Ehlenfeld, we know that the jury did not believe that Scott Ferris did this. We know Scott Ferris denied doing what the defense was accusing him of. And I wanted to really pick your brain about what goes into the vetting of people as investigators and prosecutors are developing their suspects. Would you mind kind of taking us behind the scenes and what prosecutors have to do in making sure that they've got the right person before they move forward with a case?
Sure. So, it starts with your law enforcement. The front line would be the detectives in the Cherokee County Sheriff's Department who did a fabulous job in this case. I mean, they came onto the scene, this 10-acre beautiful piece of property just outside of Atlanta. And I think they initially felt it was some sort of a health issue where Gary Ferris, who had some health problems, maybe had a heart attack or something else and ended up in this burn pile somehow, maybe accidentally. But they had to go and begin to vet everybody, to include his wife, to include his children, to include anyone else who might have had access or who might have had a motive. And they did that. They talked to everyone. They interviewed the sons. They obviously talked to Melody and they talked to others, and they were very careful in trying to make sure that they got the right person. And I believe that they did. But the behind the scenes is that you have to cross everyone off the list until you're able to narrow it down. And they did that in this case. And I would also say that Melody Farris had a chance at trial to point the finger at her son, and her defense attorneys did that, and the jury didn't buy it. They even pointed the finger at him during their closing argument, and also had a demonstrative example trying to show that Melody wasn't capable of taking her husband over to the burn pile. The jury didn't buy any of that, and this is a case, I think, of too little too late for Melody Farris.
Such great analysis, William. Thank you for that. With respect to Scott and the accusations, let's talk about that a little more. We know that he was very carefully vetted. William, thank you, for going back and reminding us of the things investigators did. Pieces of evidence coming out. I mean, everything. They had his cell phone. He wasn't physically there when this homicide was done. But yet that defense team was relentless, Franz, as you know, trying to make him the bad guy. We heard him in the clip saying maybe because he's former military, maybe because there was tension in the family. You know, these kids were all kind of living off of Dad. Dad made a very good living. What do you think that's like for him now in society? You know, I feel like today it's very hard today with everybody in the court of public opinion has an opinion and access to a keyboard, and they can launch attacks at people like Scott Ferris. Franz, what advice would you have for him if you were representing him? Just how to navigate through life after this conviction of Mom. What would you say to him?
Well, I'm going to start with the conversation with him, assuming he actually didn't have anything to do with the murder of his mother. And that's, I feel comfortable with that assumption, but if I'm giving him advice, that's where we start. You know, the bottom line is I don't know that any media tour is ever going to heal him. I don't know that I mean, there's always going to be people out there that think that he had something to do with it. So I think, you know, in terms of rebuilding his life, his reputation, I don't know that there's anything he can quote unquote do. If he's going to do documentaries, I would just urge him to be consistent and careful with what he says, because any, you know, once you start, and we're seeing this in the Karen Reed trial right now, Julie, once you start making statements to documentaries and true crime shows or podcasts, those statements are memorialized, and you know, you just need to be careful that everything's consistent. But you know, I would probably actually urge him not to go on the media tour and say, look, just let this die down. She's going to get sentenced. She is sentenced, you know, and let life move forward.
Sage advice. Franz, I knew you would have some for us. Thank you for that. We'll leave it here just for a moment. We're going to hit a break, but when we come back, we're going to turn to Melody Farris. She's also speaking out to 48 Hours, so we'll hear what she has to say after the break. Plus, we're moments away from testimony resuming in defendant Karen Reed's retrial, with John O'Keefe's dear friend Jennifer McCabe returning to the stand.
How do you explain it? Two teenagers, they go from zero to the worst crime anyone can imagine.
She wanted to get her mom out of her life, to kill her.
You turned to murder.
Yes.
You are a shrewd operator.
I'm done with this interview. You're trying to make me seem like I'm a monster, and I'm not. Let me out.
Interview with a Killer. New episode, Sunday at 8 on Court TV.
Not only did I not do this, I know who did. I know Scott killed his father. He took my husband, the father of Chris, Emily, and Amanda.
That was what Melody Farris told the court ahead of her sentencing after being convicted of murdering her husband, Gary. Her new interview with 48 Hours remains in our spotlight this morning. In the latest episode, Farris remains firm that she didn't kill her husband, Gary. But I'll give you one guess as to who she said the real killer is.
I want everyone, but especially my children, my grandchildren, and at this point, the world. I didn't do this. I know who did. And it's our son, Scott. Without a shadow of a doubt, I know he did it.
Do you believe her? Do you believe her, or do you believe her son? Well, we know the jury didn't believe that Scott killed his father, Gary. We spoke to a juror on this program. Remember that? Take a listen.
It was just the overwhelming, in my opinion, evidence that she was there during the opportune times for the murder and the cleanup. It's not difficult to imagine that she could have moved the body. When we got out to the site, it felt like it was a bit steeper than it looked in the pictures. I know my own personal strength. I know I'm a bigger lady than she is, but I don't have any mental reservations. If I had to move something, with everything available, I would have figured out a way to do it. Like, that was not a stretch for me at all.
Jury was convinced it was Melody. But we're going to play devil's advocate here. What if she's innocent? What if an innocent person was convicted here? Then what? Let's bring in our legal minds to talk about that. William Ehlenfeld and Franz Borghardt on the program this morning. Okay, so let's just say, for the sake of our analysis, that police and prosecutors and the jury, everybody got it wrong, that it wasn't Melody Farris. So then what? What now for her legally? What are her steps? William, would you walk us through that, please?
Of course, and let me say, I don't think they got it wrong. Once I heard that she was involved in an extramarital affair, that was enough for me to cause her to not have much credibility in my world, and I think that probably is the same for the jury. But let's say that perhaps she has found some new evidence that was not available to her at trial, and she wants to make a motion to the court for a new trial. That's a really heavy lift. It is not easy to convince a judge to throw out a jury verdict and let someone come back into court and have another trial. So it's got to be really strong evidence. It's got to be evidence that was not available to her at the time of trial. And I don't believe that to be the case, because when you see how quickly she has now come out and said that she knows that it was her son who did it, and her attorneys had the full opportunity at trial to point the finger at him, and they in fact did point the finger at him. They literally pointed the finger at him during their closing argument. I think her chances legally of being able to convince this judge to give her a new trial are slim to none. But it sounds like she might give it a try, probably with different attorneys, but it sounds like she's going to give it a try.
Great points. William, thank you for that. Franz, again here, I want to play devil's advocate, because I too, like William, am quite convinced that it was her, that she did it. I'm satisfied with the jury's verdict. But let's just say, for the sake of analyzing this morning, that she's an innocent person. Is there anything to be said for her being consistent with her finger pointing the finger at Scott at the trial, like William said they literally did, and then now she's still doing it to 48 hours?
So often after we go to trial, and if we lose, I advise my clients at sentencing and post-sentencing to make no statements. And in fact, the system understands that, Julie. If I stand before a judge at sentencing and say, Judge, with respect, it's my client's opportunity to do a colloquy with the court, but because she has appellate rights and she doesn't want to do anything to disturb those appellate rights, she's going to remain silent. I'm going to argue on her behalf. Everybody in the system understands that. To double down at this point is just doubling down at this point. Like it doesn't really help her. It doesn't hurt her. But most attorneys are going to tell their clients, be quiet, please stop, please shut your mouth. And look, she doesn't have to do interviews. She doesn't have to make statements. This is a choice on her part. Now, I think what she is going to do is, I think she's going to throw her defense team under the bus. And in as much as I absolutely agree with the analysis that the appellate process is going to be an uphill battle, I think she's also going to argue ineffective assistance, which is also for her going to be an uphill battle, because these attorneys did really good. They did really well at trial. They did a great job. They probably did exactly what she wanted them to do. So if I were representing her, I would tell her to shut her mouth.
Great advice, Franz. You're absolutely right. And her attorneys were very good. I remember thinking that. They were great advocates for her. But the facts are very bad for Melody Farris. And this was a robust investigation that worked out, proving her guilt in the court of law. We got to leave it there. But I can't wait to watch that full episode and see what else I think about this woman as she sits in prison until 2054. That's when she's eligible for parole. All right, that is all for opening statements. Big thanks to our legal analyst guests, William Ehlenfeld and Franz Borghardt. You guys are the best. Thank you.